When I moved into this house a few months ago, I was in desperate need of a change of scenery. I've spent the majority of my adult years since college living in a tiny one-bedroom apartment overlooking the busiest part of downtown Chicago. It was just a short walk to the station, and then from there I could get to my office in under 20 minutes every morning. I enjoyed being around all of my favorite eateries and having access to anything I needed within walking distance. But what eventually wore me down was the constant noise and sirens that come along with living in a highly populated urban area. Once I had decided that I was sick and tired of the lonely bachelor city life about a year ago, I immediately started saving my money for the down payment on a house in the suburbs. Close enough that I could still drive to work, but far enough away from the city that I'd likely never hear a police siren in the middle of the night ever again. Shortly after I had saved up what I considered to be a decent chunk of money, I found what I thought would be the perfect house for me. It was a quaint little one-story model home located in a secluded subdivision that backs up to a forested wetland known as Ba Woods. For maximum privacy, I specifically chose a house at the very back of the subdivision, on a street that had only recently been developed. There were only 2 or 3 other finished houses on the road, but mine was the only one at the very end of the street, backing up to a densely wooded area with lots of foliage. The moving process happened rather quickly, and before I knew it, I was settled into my new place. After a week or two, I had smoothly transitioned into the slower pace of suburban life, and was surprised to realize that I had actually become somewhat lonely. Without neighbors in my immediate area, I would often find myself taking long walks around the subdivision. I would sometimes wander around for an hour or two on my days off, just to see other people walking their dogs or taking a stroll with their families. One day, I had taken one of my strolls and was turning down my street to make my way home. My attention was drawn to the sound of meowing, coming from a bush off to the side of the road. I approached the bush and knelt down, shining the flashlight on my cell phone into the lower branches to see if I could pinpoint the source of the sound. Almost instantly, the light reflected off of 2 small eyes in the underbrush. With a powerful meow, a small orange tabby cat came trotting out of the bush to greet me. I chuckled to myself and jokingly asked the cat where he had come from as he began to brush against my legs. I knelt there, patting the little guy's ears and wondering if he belonged to someone in the area. He was far too friendly and social to be a feral cat, so I assumed that surely he belonged to a family nearby. He was still fairly young, maybe a year old or so. He didn't have a collar, so I scooped him up in my arms and knocked on the door of the nearest houses, asking them if they had lost a cat. None of them had ever seen him before, so I decided to keep him at my house for the night. It was already pretty late, so I wouldn't be able to get him to a vet to check for a microchip until the next day anyway. I gave him a rudimentary bath by wiping him down with damp paper towels and fed him some of the lunch meat I had in my fridge. He made himself right at home in my house, and for the very first time since moving out here, I didn't feel quite as lonely. In fact, a part of me dreaded taking him to the vet in the morning and finding out that he actually had a family that he needed to be returned to. But if it were my missing pet, I'd want someone to let me know if they had found them. So I determined that, no matter what, I would take him to the vet tomorrow morning and have them check for a microchip. For the rest of the evening, I enjoyed having the little guy curled up next to me on the couch while I caught up on reruns of Scrubs and ate my TV dinner. The next morning, I loaded him up in the car and took him to the nearest vet's office. I explained that I found him on the side of the road and that he seemed far too comfortable around humans to have been a feral cat. The vet agreed and began to scan him for a microchip. After about 30 seconds, she shook her head and informed me that he wasn't actually chipped. She explained that frequently people who want to dump their animals off will drop them off inside subdivisions, hoping that someone else will find them and take them in, so they don't have to be responsible for them anymore. The thought of someone just abandoning such a sweet animal broke my heart, and without even thinking, I asked the vet if it would be okay if I took him home since he didn't have a microchip. She laughed and told me that, as far as they were concerned, the cat already belonged to me. I thanked her and told her that I wanted to get all of his shots done while I was here, and asked if I could pick out a collar and some food from the waiting room. She told me that I was welcome to, and asked me what name to add to my little buddy's file. Almost instantly, I told her his name was Max. I didn't even have to think about it. From the moment I first laid eyes on him, I knew his name was going to be Max. After the vet finished his checkup and shots, they handed Max back to me in a cardboard cat carrier. I peeked inside of the box to see that they had put the collar on him that I had picked out, a small green collar with a bow tie and a bell right below his chin. I loaded all of Max's new belongings into the car and the two of us made our way home. The following weeks would be some of the happiest weeks of my life. Max preferred to spend his days outside while I was at work, and then at the end of the day I would come to the back door and see him trotting out of the woods, ready to come inside and spend the night at the foot of my bed. We had a routine that we followed every single night, so it came as quite a surprise when a week or so ago, I came home to find Max already sitting at the back door, pacing back and forth, looking rather agitated. I turned the handle and he quickly pushed his way inside before I even had a chance to open the door all the way. His fur was standing on end, and he ran past me down the hallway into my bedroom without ever looking back, the bell on his collar jingling frantically the whole time. I chuckled at his strange behavior, figuring that he'd probably seen a deer or something in the woods and had gotten spooked. I didn't think much of it until I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of him growling and howling loudly at the back door. When I turned on the light and made it to the end of the hallway, I could see the outline of Max's arched back and poofy fur as he stared out into the dark woods and continued to growl. I called out to him and tried to calm him down, flipping the switch by the door to turn on the outside lights to show him that nothing was there. His eyes remained fixed on the tree line, as if he were seeing something deeper within the trees beyond my own sight, the sound of the bell on his collar jingling rapidly as he turned and sprinted back down the hallway to my bedroom. I knew that it wasn't unheard of to have a mountain lion or a coyote come through these less developed areas, and I figured that he had probably seen something further back than I had. I thought to myself that I would probably keep him inside for the next couple of days just to be safe. Then I turned and followed him back to the bedroom, closing the door behind me, so that he wouldn't wander back to the back door and get himself worked up again. I couldn't keep the bedroom door closed every night though, because his litter box was in the laundry room. So for the following few nights, I would find myself awoken to the familiar sound of Max growling loudly at the back door and staring off into the woods. Each time I would turn on the light to show him that there was nothing there, and he would sprint back to the bedroom, his little bell jingling the entire way. After nearly an entire week of this behavior, I called the vet to see if I should bring him in for a visit. The vet told me that he probably just had an encounter with a wild animal, and it had given him some anxiety about the woods behind my house. I agreed, and we continued on with our routine as usual. Tonight, I woke up to the sound that I had become accustomed to of Max being worked up and growling loudly outside my bedroom. I sighed and began to make my way out there to calm him down, so numb to the occurrence that I didn't even bother turning on the hallway light. Half awake, I rubbed my eyes and called out to Max, telling him that it was okay to come back to bed. As I reached out for the switch to turn on the outside light, I noticed that the back door was slightly ajar and wasn't actually closed at all. My stomach dropped as I stared at the open door, and I snapped back into reality for a moment. Cold sweat broke out onto my forehead as I recognized the familiar sound of Max's bell coming up from behind me in the darkened hallway. Stricken with fear, I turned to see the familiar silhouette of Max's arched back and fluffy tail standing in the hallway behind me. I must have walked past him in my stupor. It didn't take long for me to realize that I was still hearing the sound of Max's growling. But this time, he wasn't staring at the back door. He was staring into the darkness of my bedroom. My throat closed and my heart pounded as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. And for the first time, I could see what Max had been growling at all this time. Just beyond the doorway, standing off to the side of my bed in the corner of the room, was the looming figure of a grotesque creature staring back down the hallway at me. Its limbs seemed to contort in unsettling ways. Long, stringy white hair clung to its scalp, and beady black eyes locked with mine. Paralyzed, I heard the sound of Max's bell as he turned and began to run towards me in the back door, a sound that indicated that I should do the same. I turned and scooped up Max in my arms as I fled out of the back door, never looking back to see if I was being pursued. I ran down the road to the neighbor's house and asked to use their phone to call the police. A while later, they came to investigate the house. They never found evidence of anyone inside, but they did confirm that the back door had been forced open by something outside. I don't know what to think about what happened to the two of us, but I think that starting today, Max and I are going to start looking for somewhere else to live.